to get back.
Welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Aurovilians. Today, I'm very happy to say part 3 with me. I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about the construction of the Matra Mandir. This is so fascinating. There were the pillars, of course.
The pillars.
Yes.
You want to know the pillar story?
Yes, please.
No, the pillar story, of course, is that the mother had the vision of the inner room, and she told Roger exactly how to make this room. Gave him the 24 meters, and she held her hand out, and somebody said they actually measured when she held her hands out how big she wanted the crystal, and it came to 70 centimeters. So when they ordered it, they said, make it 70 centimeters. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But the pillars is so interesting because what happened was, the mother told them 12 pillars. So when they made the ceiling, it's self-supporting. So you don't need the pillars to hold up the roof and the ceiling of the chamber. And those 12 pillars, at one point, Roger came back to Auroville and he said, we don't need to put the pillars in. And then the community was a little bit stunned because, Mother had seen the 12 pillars. And he said, Mother didn't understand that they weren't needed to support the roof. And when he said Mother didn't understand, that really, a lot of people got upset, And so nobody really said anything. It was a big meeting. And afterward, we went back up to the construction and we just put in all the emplacements for the 12 pillars.
Oh.
Piero did not agree with this at all, or nobody did.
Oh, Pierre didn't agree with that also?
No. So we made the emplacements and we did the pillars. So that's how the 12 pillars got in the room. And Mother had said those things. There's some conversations you can read in the agenda.
I've read them all, yes.
I think she said, people need them to rest their back. Or
but
something.
there was occult meanings behind all these things that
absolutely.
we could never understand.
No, because,
she said it, do it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that this thing of 12, because everything is based on the number 12.
Yes.
And the room has 12 sides. So that, of course, means the echo in there is extreme. That's why people have to be very quiet.
Yes.
Because somebody coughs and it echoes like anything. But I also had just a personal theory, the way the 12 sides concentrate the energy. And the energy of the marble, you see that the marble in the room is the same marble that built all the temples and the palaces of India. It all came from Rajasthan. Then they brought all the marble from Italy, from Carrara, that built the churches and the cathedrals of Europe. And the same marble that Michelangelo used to make all those famous statues.
Yes.
And that marble, of course, is over 1 billion years old. So you can imagine the vibrational field that creates, where you take the best marble from the whole world and you put it in there, and then you go inside that chamber. So what does that do to the body? Because Mother was so into this transformation of the cells, and more and more I start to feel that Matra Mandir is an energy transformative center, because all the symbolisms are, some are based on esoteric sciences and all this. Nobody knows them all, but they seem to all be there, and they all create some sort of energy vibration. And so the combination of all of that, and also the Matra Mandir being on the ley lines, crossing ley lines, there's got to be something happening, on the energetic level that we can't even figure out.
I fully agree with you, by the way. Fully agree.
The
Om choir is the same.
Yes, exactly.
Those vibrations go through the world.
Exactly.
Nothing can stop them. No walls, no cement, no concrete.
No. But you see, the whole world is made out of energy. We know that from science already.
Yes.
The quantum stuff and
yes.
all of that is so clear, that those energy fields. And then I try, okay, what is that energy exactly because the world that we're in, this, all of these bodies and things, it's a manifested energy. That energy is manifested from the Big Bang on 14 billion years. And what is that energy? That energy is the mother, because the mother is the energy of creation, of matter, of manifestation. And what is the real name for that? Of course, is love. It's love. So everything we can feel and touch, all of that is actually love. And that love, what is that love? It's an energy field. And so all this notion of separateness and of past and present and future, it's all in our mind.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes.
So
The past is gone.
Yeah.
The present is gone in the moment we're
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And there's only the future.
Yeah.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah, and you see, Mother said that wonderful thing about flowers. You know, people were lamenting, you know, this flower, it blooms for a day and then it's gone. She said, no, that flower blooms forever.
Yes.
Once it blooms, that bloom is there. And she gave that vibration to the roses, you know, love.
Yes.
And I think all over the world, people give roses for love. They don't even know,
They don't, but they do it.
but they do it.
Yeah.
And well, they think that they have the love and they're giving it, but they don't know that the
Yes.
rose is giving the love, even if they don't have it. The rose itself, and and science, you know, tells you how a rose grows and all this. But where does all that beauty and where does all that color and the perfume and that perfection come from? Comes from love. And who is love? It's the Mother Earth, Mother Nature. Every language says that. Mother Earth, Mother Nature.
Yes.
So there's no question. So the Matra Mandir is such a concentrated expression of that.
A
we
force
have-
field.
Absolutely. It's you know, it's
Yeah.
stronger than a nuclear reactor.
Exactly.
And then you have, see, then you're surrounded by all these petals, 12 petals. You surround it with 12 gardens. Every garden having the vibrations of the qualities of the mother. The petals have the qualities of the mother. And with that kind of thing, I mean, when you get within some meters of the Matra Mandir area, already you start to feel something, you know. And then when you're walking in, you can feel that shift in the energy, and it affects people. It affects people surprisingly.
You must see a lot of it taking these groups.
Yes, because somebody will always comment in you know, in whatever form it comes to them. You know, this is like outer space. You know, they use the space metaphors all the time. This, you know, that this is something from another world. They always say that.
Tell me about constructing the four.
Oh, you meant those pillars?
No,
or the-
those. Now I want to hear those.
Yes. Well, those, you know, I always understood. You see, they called this is the whole thing is based, of course, on the mother symbol itself.
Right.
So you have the 12 petals around in the mother symbol, but inside you have the 4.
Mm-hmm.
So these, of course, are the powers of the mother, but the main powers, because there's more than just those 4, you know. And of course, in India, it's so well defined with Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, Maheswari, Mahasaraswati.
And Mahakali is in the north.
North, yes, north. Each one has a direction. Each one also has a special symbol over the door. You know, there's a triangle and a circle and all the way around. Each one has a special thing, and what I've been feeling there now is these are like 4 arms. You know, a lot of these. You know, you see these statues of the deities. You know, they always have multiple arms. So it's like Mother Earth, Mother Nature has these 4 arms with those 4 powers, and she holds up the room. So those pillars are holding up the room, and we did those pillars, you know, layer by layer by layer by layer by layer, and of course the energy was building up. It was building up, and then once you got to the floor level, you put the floor in, and then you start coming back, and then it converges in a circle. Like the middle of the mother symbol, of course, is that circle. And so in Matra Mandir, it comes through the top of Matra Mandir, there's a circle. and then it comes down, strikes the crystal, goes through another mother symbol that's in marble on the floor,
Mhm.
and then down to the next level where there's a kind of a three-dimensional mother symbol when you
Mhm.
come up that step.
When you come up the little
yeah,
steps.
it goes through that center, and then it goes down. And when you go under Matra Mandir and you look up at the ceiling, there's a symbol on the ceiling, and the sun rays coming through that. And then it comes down to that small crystal where it's grounded. So you have this solid shaft of light, and the sun, of course, is the most powerful energy center that we have in our solar system. It's a star.
Yes.
And we're bringing it actually right into the building. So, I mean, what stronger symbol can you get? And then, of course, it corresponds, the building corresponds to the body. And we have those 7 energy centers, everybody talks about the 7 chakras.
Mhm.
So that sun ray that comes through the whole building also is symbolic of the higher consciousness, of course. In every culture, people worship the sun,
Yes.
So
Yes.
you let it in up here, and it goes right
Mm.
through you and touches and opens every center. So you really pack it in there.
But the construction of these must have been a huge event.
Well, you were there.
I was there, but I want to hear it from you.
but you see, we the whole community came, and working at night, and the ashram, the people from the ashram, and I mean, looking back, it was fantastic. Of course, at the time, the work was a little tough at times, and people were really sweated it out there, passing the cement by hand. But there were so many stories at every concreting, things that happened to people, things that people saw,
Oh.
all sorts of things. But I mean, how do you can't even judge these things, and you don't want to. I
Yes.
mean, people experienced things, saw things, and especially when we had to go up there every night, somebody had to go to Matra Mandir because of the curing the concrete. So we always had to keep the water, everything had to stay wet. And we didn't have any automated systems, so we were on this rotating schedule. So somebody would go, after dinner, and then somebody had to go, I think, around midnight, and then around 4 in the morning. So we had these schedules. So your turn came up fairly regularly, and but you'd go up there and you'd be by yourself. And you come into this thing, and there's a couple of little lights, and the wind is blowing. And it's just, it was another world. And you put in this water.
And the last one was completed on the day Mother left?
Well, that was about the floor. Yeah, when the mother left, it was that November 17th in 1973. They did that floor, but I wasn't there for that. I mean, they were just coming out of the ground and putting it together, and then started up.
You must have known Cow John
All these people.
and Johnny,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
and John.
Yeah.
If you could share some
Well,
remembrances.
these people all are very colorful.
Molly.
Molly, of course. I mean, the real meaning for me is in that sense of community, and each person, because there's that sense of freedom in Oroville, you saw that the individual could develop fully, and people became quite distinct from one another, and that created the richness.
Yeah.
And we had so many wonderful times at our tea time there, and it was hard to get out of the tea time, because it would start and these incredible conversations would start, and these philosophical, theological, every kind of discussion you can imagine would get going, and you would have this group of people, and it was hard to get back to work. Sometimes those tea times extended a little longer than the 15 allotted minutes.
I think Rude was part of them.
Oh, Rude!
A big part of them, no?
Rude was. Oh my God! You can hardly speak about Rude without, because he was you know, he was a giant there because he came before anybody. He got up early in the morning. You know, he always got up around 4:30, and then he wrote in his journal. And then he would have a cup of coffee and a BD, and then he would write some more in his journal. Then he would have breakfast. He always got to Matra Mandir by 7 o'clock, and he started working. You know, most of us came. Usually we would get there around 8, and but he was already there working and bending all that steel, you know, and he just was a workhorse. He just relentless. But the greatest thing, he was so funny. You know, entertained everybody endlessly. We were I laughed so hard, and see, I had a very good connection with Ruud because he had been a Franciscan priest, so he had all that theological training, and I had studied in the seminar. I was never a priest, but I did the studies, so I knew, you know, we could have a few conversations in Latin and this and that, and talk about the church and talk about all these things. So we had a very, very close connection, and you know, he was always reflecting. And amazing thing that he did was to harmonize the forces at Matra Mandir, because you see, you always had these conflicts between Piero and Roger, and then you had different groups at Matra Mandir working, and sometimes, you know, the groups did not get along with each other. And at different times we had to kind of split up the work groups, and you know, we were doing one task, some others were doing another task, so there wouldn't be too. But he was the one always discovering ways in which we could work together and bring the community, you know, closer. And he did a tremendous thing one time, I remember, because there were. At that earlier part, before that really got bad with the Sri Aurobindo Society, you know, he tried to harmonize some of these things with the society also, but none of those worked out. But among the Aurovillians, I think he did an amazing work. And between Piero and Roger, he did a lot of work as like a mediator between them. And yeah, he was phenomenal. And of course Barbara was there too, you know, and she worked in the office for so many years.
Yes.
But I remember Ruud, we kept telling him, don't work so hard, you know, stop the beedies and the coffee. See, smoking those beedies and drinking that coffee to get that, you know, push. And so then he had a heart attack. I went to the hospital, and so I took Akash over there, his son Akash, to visit him. So we're in the hospital room, he's lying in the bed, and he says, you know, he said, we should go out on the road. You know, Jipmer Hospital is right on the highway, so they have all those tea stalls out there. We should go out and have a cup of coffee, I want to have a beedi. And I said, well, you know, you can't just walk out of the hospital. He says, oh yes you can. He got out of his bed in a hospital gown, but he pulled a pair of shorts on the hospital gown. We walked out the door, and of course, you know, there's such chaos in Jipmer. You just walk right out the door, you know. We walked right out. We walked out the tea shop. We sat in the tea, smoked a couple of beedies. We had some coffee, and then he said, "Okay, let's go back." And so when he walked back, he got in his bed, you know, like nothing happened. So then that was, I think that was the first heart attack. Then he had another one, the same thing happened. And then the doctor told him, you got to give up the beedies, you got to give up the coffee.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't. So then the parents came, his parents came to visit him, and they said, look, you've been working so hard, why don't we go on a little holiday? We'll go up to Yercaud for... He said, sure, yeah, let's do that. So they pack up the taxi and everything, and they zip up there. In those days, they put all the luggage on the roof. You know, they piled it on the roof. So they arrived at the hotel, and so Ruud jumped out of the car. He took all these suitcases off the roof, and then he carries it up into the hotel, takes up the first bag, takes up the second bag, up the stairs, you know, comes up to the third bag, and falls over. Died from the heart attack. That was it. And then they couldn't get his body back because nobody would take a dead body in the taxi. So finally they found some guy who would do it for quite a bit of money. And so then we got the news, it was a big shock. So then we got these ice blocks and we put it out in front of his house. So they brought the body, we put this body on this ice, and then went over to Matre Mandir and they started making a coffin. They made the coffin out of the shuttering, the old shuttering boards,
Oh, yes.
that were no longer used, and they made this beautiful coffin, just working in the night. And we sat up all night, vigil there, all this incense. It was amazing, amazing moment. And then we buried him in the garden. He's the only person buried in the garden that I know. Dadu we cremated in the garden. Dadu from Orissa, who lived in the camp. In the garden back there, we did a cremation for him. But Ruud we buried just on that little hill, just by the amphitheater that looks toward Matre Mandir. And we had a victory plant there, the alamang.
Mm-hmm.
We had that yellow flower,
Yeah.
but there was no marking, no thing, and
Oh.
so people don't know where
Yeah.
the bones are, but I kind of know the spot. But the whole community came. That was one of the biggest funerals I ever remembered.
Oh.
I mean, just everybody came. Yeah, it was really, really pretty powerful. And then, of course, he had just finished his book, and Alain Grancola published it. House for a Third Millennium.
Yes.
A beautiful little book he wrote.
Yeah.
And they've already gone through a couple printings of it. It's a wonderful book. It gives his perspective on Matre Mandir, which is
Alain had a bit of a different take on it.
yeah.
He said that there was, I won't mention names, but there was a man in Pondicherry who guided people through his pendulum,
Uh-huh.
and that Ruud was very, very deeply into it, and he got too deep into the occult, and
Ah.
that's what had killed him.
Oh, really?
And Alain said that he would never forgive that man who was doing that.
Mm.
Someone then went to Nolini
Uh-huh.
and told him this story, and Nolini very quietly said, "The psychic being is our pendulum."
Yeah.
Interesting story.
Yeah.
I had a vision of the Matre Mandir years before it started, probably 70, driving through on the motorcycle. I saw our house, Mary Helen and my house,
Mm-hmm.
and it was sort of round, and there were places where people would sit all around, and there was a light coming through the center on into the living room,
Yes.
and that was that was our house.
That was in
And now
1970.
Yeah, I know the Matre Mandir is my house now.
Yeah.
It's our house.
Our house.
I called it our house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've some visitors have told me, that they had already seen the Matre Mandir in their dreams and in their visions, but they thought it did not exist. They didn't think it was on. This was something
Yeah,
that
yeah,
came
yeah.
in there.
Something in the subtle,
Yeah, something in the
subtle
subtle.
worlds.
But actually,
Hmm.
and then they get there, and there it is.
I'd like to ask you a bit about, because he's very, very quiet, and Piero and Gloria,
Mm-hmm.
and I understood that his attention to detail was second to none,
It was phenomenal. Yeah,
and everything had to be perfectly done.
Yes, and that, of course, that was hard on us because we were waiting always for these drawings. See, he had all, of course, Roger's architectural plans. He had to translate them all into working drawings to give to us. So he was so careful, and like we have a concreting coming up, we want the plan, we have to make the stuff, So we're waiting for him to come in the morning, and he's going over, and he was so careful, and he was so worried about the quality of the steel and the quality of the cement all the time, that we would get a bad load of cement or the steel would be inferior, so he was always checking these things, and he always did all these over adages, everything was built twice as strong as it should be
Oh,
to make absolute sure that nothing would, go wrong, because for him, and he was, he was really intense about it. And so that, some of us are a little more casual types, well, do we have to, go over and over and the steel is, 30 mm, isn't that enough? I mean, and do we have to put more rebar into this thing, And so that was, and then he was so careful about the, the safety and all those things. He was always, telling people, we have to do this and we have to do that, and it was a miracle that we had all these untrained people working there for 37 years.
Yes.
The only tragedy, of course, was Deanne's accident and a couple other small things. Nothing. One of the ramps slid back. I wasn't there. John and I weren't there, and Armand was there. And one of the ramps slid back against his leg, and I cracked this bone for Armand. And there were a few other breaks, and I got a rebar into my leg, also. Things like that, but nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, but that nobody's wearing a helmet, nobody's wearing gloves, no open shoes.
Yeah.
You're 4 stories up on those pipes, walking, in the heat, and it's
Divine
incredible.
protection was
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember one time, and a few people saved other people at different times. Somebody was like slipping and somebody grabbed them. And one time, Anu Manjumdar, Anu,
Oh, yes.
who writes the books, she was working up there and she slipped. I grabbed her,
Oh.
and then she didn't seem too serious. It didn't seem like it affected her very much, but it really did. She didn't want to come back and work, and then she said, I had to force myself to come back, and because I knew I would have that fear all my life, And she came back and she worked, and then she was working over in the when we were doing the precast beams, and then one of the beams swung and she broke her collarbone. So, but she went through that also, and and it kept going. So everybody had their story, their learning curve, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who worked at Matra Mandira that can't tell you,
Yeah.
a dozen stories or so.